Initiation tells the story of a fictional writer named Alan Wake, who is trapped in a nightmare, desperately trying to find the manuscript of a novel he has forgotten he has written.
Did you write these pages, Mr. Wake?
I'm trying to remember it.
You're the killer, the cult leader.
No! You've got the wrong man! It's my fault! It got out!
Wake has a double. Where is he now?
I don't want to be in the story, just write me out of the story!
Okay, I guess I'm playing Alan Wake.
NANI?!
Alan Wake is an action horror third-person shooter game that follows the titular best-selling thriller novelist as he tries to uncover the mystery behind his wife's disappearance during a vacation in a small fictional town of Bright Falls, Washington. All the while, the events from the plot of his latest novel, which he cannot remember writing by the way, are becoming a reality. The game is a very well-written homage to Twin Peaks that has high ambitions about how it wants to visually present its narrative. But, in my opinion, the execution is a bit on the clunky side. The game is broken down into episodes, and every single one of them makes use of title screens, in the beginning and at the end of an episode. The introductory title screens had a tendency to go by a little too fast, but weirdly enough, the closing ones were paced just fine. The ending screens were also accompanied by thematically appropriate musical numbers, which is an artistic choice that I very much appreciated. My favorite one was the first ending screen, which featured the song In Dreams, performed by Roy Orbison. There were moments in the game when the camera would zoom in on a character of interest, and much like the opening title screens, the zoom-ins would go by a little too fast. Speaking of the camera, in a lot of the cutscenes it moved around a bit too much, and the editing of the scenes sometimes had a bit of a weird rhythm to it, which it didn't seem like it was intentional. The people responsible for the cutscenes used slow motion in order to add gravitas to certain moments in the game, which is a nice idea, but the problem is that more often than not, they chose the wrong moments to incorporate said ideas. Now, I know that until the last sentence, I've been critically bashing the game's story presentation, but I actually enjoyed the game's narrative itself very much. As I said before, I really like the game's writing overall, but I'm especially a fan of the manuscript pages that you collect throughout the levels. The writing style in the pages is very descriptive, almost painterly even, which is a standard style of writing for every written story, but I don't know, it's a detail that stood out as very special to me. I'm also a fan of Alan's tendency to narrate his thoughts about the situations that he's in, which is very reminiscent of this other Remedy character. Much like in Twin Peaks, the rest of the characters all had uniquely quirky personalities, but never to the levels of quirk as in the before mentioned show, giving the game more of a grounded feel in comparison. Every one of the characters is expertly voice acted, but the facial animations are a bit on the weird side. The game originally came out in 2010, so it's somewhat understandable, at least in my book. The darkly humorous and overacted TV shows a la Max Payne make a return, and I found them to be very charming. I also enjoyed listening to the in-game radio show, hosted by one of the residents of Bright Falls, which gives us a glimpse of how the rest of the town was affected by the strange phenomenon that was conjured by Alan's own mind. At the time of Alan Wake's release, most of its contemporaries were cover-based shooters, in the vein of Gears of War, but the subject of this review dared to completely ditch the then trendy cover system and focus more on gun combat, built around fluid and responsive movement, which helped it differentiate itself even more from its competitors. Since the game is a shooter, you need baddies to shoot at, so the usual enemy type that you'll fight against in this game are high aggro, darkness-possessed humans, wielding different varieties of melee weapons, and before you're even able to hurt them at all, you'll first need to destroy the shield of darkness that surrounds them with the help of your trusty flashlight. The aggressive nature of the possessed, and the fact that you first need to thoroughly illuminate them before you make them unalive, made for very tough and nail-biting battles, especially in the beginning, when your arsenal is limited to a flashlight and a single handgun. Over time, your arsenal will gradually expand, which will include 2 types of shotguns, a hunting rifle, flares, which are used to keep the baddies away, a flare gun, which in this game functions as a grenade launcher, and flash grenades, which fulfill the role of regular grenades. Other than the possessed humans, you'll also be up against swarms of possessed crows and animated inanimate objects that both die after an adequate exposure to photons. The game also features a few puzzles throughout its duration, of which only the last one is worthy to even be called a puzzle. There are also levels that are a bit larger and more open than the rest, during which you can even operate vehicles, and for a gameplay feature that's barely even in the game, they handled pretty darn well. For this review, I played the remastered version of the game, which features higher resolution textures, shadows, and volumetric lights, and on top of that, it also adds more objects throughout some of the levels, and it also updates the character models. With most of the characters, it seems like they only addressed their textures and made them sport more physically accurate materials, but with our main boy Alan here, the changes are a bit more obvious, who now more closely resembles his real-life face model, Ilka Villi. Both the original and the remaster make artistic use of light, dark, and sound design to create the game's strong atmosphere, which is at its strongest during our routine strolls through the thick forests of the Pacific Northwest when swallowed by the cold darkness of the night. This action horror game was more successful at making me scared from the dark than most of the pure horror games out there, and much of the heavy lifting is done by the sound effect that plays when you find yourself in the darkness. This sound effect very effectively replicates, and as a result, creates the gnawing feeling that something is following you, which made it very effective at keeping my nerves on the edge. Despite the dark atmospheric nature of the forests, their terrain is built from relatively low amount of polygons, which results in them being a bit more angular than I would like. I also think that Alan's animations have a bit of a cartoony feel to them, which contrasts unfavorably with the game's realistic art style. The soundtrack, on the other hand, mixed in a little too well with the rest of the game, which means that it went largely unnoticed, with the exception of the classic heavy metal song that was blasting at the farm fight and a few of the songs featured at the end episode title screens. Wake is a compelling journey through a captivating narrative that successfully blends elements of horror and action, leaving players immersed in a world where light is their most potent weapon against the encroaching darkness. Despite the clunky editing and camera movement, I still ended up liking the story, thanks to the engagingly written narrative and compelling characters. I'm also a fan of the combat, which was designed in the style of classic third-person shooters, which focused more on movement and avoiding enemy attacks, while dispatching them with the use of your extensive arsenal. As for the visuals, let's just say that the lack of polygon density in the forests wasn't enough to soil the game's beautifully creepy atmosphere. Thank you guys for watching, and if I manage to make another video, I hope I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a nice day!